First off, just want to say welcome. So excited for all of you joining us today. My name is Courtney Harms, and I lead the utilities practice here at BlastPoint. I'll be your host for this next hour. I am honored to share the stage, the virtual stage, with the rest of the people here. Quick housekeeping before we get started. So you can put your utilities affordability score in about 30 seconds by heading to pressurepoint.blastpoint.com. If you want, you can open it up in another tab while we walk through all this. We're saving the last 10 minutes for live Q&A, so feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A panel at any time, not just at the end. We'll also have polls running in the chat, so please answer them so we can read the room. And 2 polls before we get started. First one is up now. Where are you in your affordability program work today? Are you just getting started, building it out, or running it at scale? And then finally, the second poll is, what's the biggest barrier that you're hitting? Is it awareness, paperwork, stigma, or funding? And I just want to give you a preview of what you're going to get for this next hour. You're going to get a take-home playbook at the end of this with the framework, the data sources, and a checklist of things that you can start doing about this tomorrow. And with that, I would like to introduce the panel. So again, my name is Courtney Harms. I'm an account manager here at BlastPoint for our utility customers. And then we'll go Bill, Tom, and finally Elizabeth.
Absolutely. Thank you much, Courtney. Bill LeBlanc, I've been working in the industry for a long time, worked at Pacific Gas and Electric in the rates department, then went to the Electric Power Research Institute and spent a lot of years at eSource and in consulting. And kind of my theme throughout my career is human behavior, and that we have to design our programs focused not on technology only, but on really understanding customers better and doing our targeting and segmentation to make sure that we're meeting their needs, not just the grid needs.
And Tom?
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks, everybody, for being here. My name is Tom Hines, and I'm one of the co-founders and principals at Tierra Resource Consultants since 2013. I have over 30 years of experience in utility DSM programs from a design perspective, an implementation perspective, and evaluation. I've helped clients earn over 25 national awards for excellence in program design and delivery, and that's what the experience we're using to leverage for some of the playbooks that we're talking about today.
And finally, Elizabeth.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Courtney. My name's Elizabeth Paulson, and I currently am the Customer Assistance Supervisor for Chesapeake Utilities. About 8 months ago, I decided to retire from JEA as the Customer Assistance Manager after working there for about 14 years and starting a customer assistance program. And a friend of mine said, I don't think you're done yet. And the next thing you know, here I am. Most of my background is in nonprofit work. Worked for the Girl Scouts, Junior Achievement. I worked for a lot of different places that have really helped me understand what it is to work with the community. My theme is using my powers for good. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Now let's get into it. So before we get into the methodology, let me tell you what we keep hearing from our utility customers. Utilities are not blind to this problem. Utilities have rates data, they have billing data, they have customer data. They're running assistance programs. On paper, the inputs are all there. And yet the customers who are most at risk are still not getting help. They're not enrolling, they're not calling in, they're falling behind on their bills quietly. So that's the gap. It's not a data gap. It's not entirely a funding gap. It's a targeting and it's a reach gap. And so that's what this next hour is all about. The pressure tends to show up at utilities that look stable on paper. Moderate rates, but the service territory is high poverty. Customers are stretched thin, arrears are climbing at utilities whose rates sit below the national average, and standard reporting doesn't pick this up because standard reporting is rate-based. And so, Bill, you've been in this for a long time. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So when you kind of really roll up your sleeves and look at the data, it's not necessarily only the low-income people who are struggling to pay their bills. We found that probably almost 50% of customers in any given service territory are having to make decisions about when and how they can pay all their bills. Because it's a terrible game they have to play each month, which is which bill am I going to not pay? They've got prescription medicine, they've got food, they've got their rent. Gasoline is now doubled in price, and their electricity and the gas bills are also possibly going up a bit. But at the end of the day, they have to decide which is the one that I can afford to not pay and get a month maybe where I can be a month late without getting penalties. And so a lot of times these are maybe middle income customers. It's not necessarily a 1-to-1 ratio between what their demographics and what their rates are. So we have to really kind of dive in and see what the sub-segments are, because there's people with very low incomes that pay all of their bills and they can do that. So we also then have to go look at the next level, which is the why behind not being able to pay the bill for electricity and gas. And a lot of times that's in their dwelling issue. So what they're renting or what they're owning. And I'll talk about that later. But just remember that it's a very big portion of your customers who are struggling. I don't have to worry about it. I'm on auto pay, but that's not something that people really enjoy having to think about on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for that. And so here we want to talk about why should the utility invest in this beyond just a regulatory requirement? Well, one of those reasons is the arrears delta. So customers who are in arrears, who are not on assistance, carry meaningful higher average balances than those who are. So we pulled this in directly from the utilities data, comparing program enrollment to delinquent balances, and that gap is real money. Second is call center costs. A large share of inbound calls are billing or payment extension related at roughly $11 per call, and that benchmark's kind of on the low end. Those dollars add up fast. And so targeted assistance routing can pull out a measurable chunk of that volume out of the queue. Tom will speak about that later more when we discuss our roadmap for utilities. And third, this matters for CSAT and rate cases. Delinquent customers on assistance score higher in CSAT than delinquent customers off assistance. And CSAT is an important factor that regulators look at in rate cases. So essentially what you do with assistance dollars can shape your next docket. And then finally, it's the assistance gap itself. With only 18% of LIHEAP eligible households getting reached, that shows that the gap to serve is real and quantifiable. So the point of this slide is that doing this work pays for itself. You don't have to make the argument to leadership just based on goodwill alone. Tackling this problem can make your bottom line move. And so what you're seeing here is the core methodology slide for PressurePoint. So there's two views, and we have those shown side by side. So on the left side, you have the rate only view. The residential rate is what gets reported. It's what the press covers. It's what regulators look at. It's the same number for every customer at the utility. A utility with rates above the national average can still serve a service territory where most of the people are doing fine. But think about what the rate actually tells you. It tells you what everyone pays. It says nothing about whether the people paying it can actually afford it, which that brings us to the right side of this slide. So on the right side, this view, you have rate plus poverty. Affordability pressure spikes when you compare the rate to the local poverty level. A lot of the heaviest pressure comes from the poverty side, not from the rate side. And so that's what PressurePoint measures, rate plus poverty together. And when you run it that way, the utilities with the heaviest pressure are not always the ones with the highest rates. And so this slide is kind of the visual punchline. Two kinds of pressure show up on the index. So obvious pressure on the left, this is a high rate utility already in the headlines. The press knows about them, regulators know about them. The score confirms what everybody already sees. Now you have the hidden pressure on the right-hand side. This is a moderate rate utility in a high poverty region. Few people are watching this one. The rate looks fine, the bills look manageable on paper, but the customers are stretched. So PressurePoint sees both of these. The rate alone only sees the obvious choice. So once again, I want to remind you that you can pull your utility score at PressurePoint.BlastPoint. It takes about 30 seconds. And again, feel free to pull it open in another tab. We'll do a walkthrough of it in just a minute. But before we walk through this tool, even when utilities know there's pressure, the assistance programs they have today miss the customers who need them the most. And there's well-documented barriers. Now, Tom, I know this is something that you've been working on for years.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. And there's really some like classic research on this that indicates some of the real significant barriers that we have here on the slide. There are others, but these are ones that we keep coming back to over and over. It starts with awareness and education. No one's going to take action until they understand and are aware of your programs. And what we find is that most customers who haven't been in this kind of a particular need just aren't thinking about it and have no awareness of what you offer. And what's important about this is meeting customers where they're at and not thinking of them as a monolith in terms of the messaging, the channels for that messaging, and really getting them to sort of understand the messages that work for them around what kind of support is available. And so really segmentation around this is important in terms of where we meet customers at and the types of channels that we use. Is it a digital media or is it more printed, direct mail for like more elderly populations, for instance? The second is you can have customers that are very aware, but then they need to take action. And what can often happen when they go to take action is the amount of friction they face in getting a solution implemented. And so what we've seen is that there are some utilities who are doing a great job in awareness, and then you see this massive drop off from the folks who go to the portals for the applications for these kind of programs to the ones who actually go through the whole process and get the assistance. And so there are some simple plays here, things like, and we've used these, helping to pre-qualify customers for income eligibility before they get there. That really streamlines the process. What are other things we can do to streamline intake? And then what we often see is that it's often a bit of a quilt of different agencies that can provide assistance. And so can we have a one-stop shop where we're integrating across those agencies so I'm not filling out the same type of forms over and over? Really helps to, increase enrollments versus just folks who are aware. And then finally, one that's particularly important in your affordability programs is this stigma and pride. And, what we often hear is like, oh, it's not really, that wasn't meant for me. I haven't been somebody who's really needed that help. Give it to someone younger than me or whatever other sort of excuse that means that they're not going to take advantage of something that they're eligible for and that would help them and actually help the utility in general. And so, really understanding those personas and not speaking to them as you're low income and so this program's for you, but being more nuanced in the way we talk about it. And there's a secret sauce to all of this that I think Elizabeth has done a really good job of expressing. So I wanted to turn it to you, Elizabeth, for what really connects all these things together in terms of how we get things done with customers.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Tom, I love when you called it the quilt of assistance. I believe you said that. That just like kind of warms my heart because as somebody who works in customer assistance, I am trying to get everybody to be on my team. I feel like I'm like the softball coach trying to get people to come and be on my team. It's about awareness. You have to talk about buy-in. It's internal customers and external customers. In order for a utility to move forward, you can't just keep doing business as usual. You have to convince people, in a way, a sales job, but I don't like to think of it that way. That stigma of getting a customer to buy in and awareness is also inside our company right now. I've got to try and get people that are willing to think differently. So who tells the story and how do you do it? It's a barrier just as real as the other three. So the 3 steps, awareness, education, and then building trust. You don't trust the people who can help you. You won't engage with them. I love building that relationship. It ends up being the last step, and that's the biggest part of the evolution here. Quick wins build trust internally and externally.
Yep. And what's nice is Elizabeth has built a fantastic framework that organizes the response, a response to all of this. So Elizabeth, can you walk us through this build, educate, and integrate?
I first want to just give a little shout out to Sheila Presley, who hired me at JEA. I didn't even know what a KWH was when I came in to work in the utility field, but she described how we needed to build, educate, and integrate solutions. So what we're using right now at Chesapeake Utilities, where I just started 8 months ago, is this particular framework. Building the program is really standing it up. It's building agency partnerships. It's finding every single MOU that needs to be in place, creating sponsorships, community outreach, we're redesigning our financial assistance program. Our hope is to have an agency portal in place and then single stop integrations. We're going to be working with Single Stop, which is a national agency. Of course, that's still down the road yet. So I don't want to say the contract is signed because it isn't yet, but it sure does look like it because customers answer 12 questions and they get a list of every resource available in their area. And then there's educate. We have to train the touch points that you already have. So call center scripts, training and development, and field tech playbooks. I'm working out of Florida City Gas right now, which is a subsidy of Chesapeake. I'm working to try and build friendships and relationships with all of these guys in there every day. It's a different kind of world for me. Billing inquiry is always something that we have to work on, especially if you have any kind of issues. Use the moments that you already have with the customer. And then there's integrate. So we have some solutions already in place, but we can make them better. And the point is that we want to really cross all of these things together so they all work together in one felt swoop to change the customer assistance framework that you have at your utility. And that's my hope.
Awesome. And that's the structure for the rest of the hour. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through PressurePoint. So most affordability tools stop at the rate. Now PressurePoint doesn't because the rate alone won't tell you whether your customers can afford it. And so what we have done is we've layered in the income side, specifically the median income in your service territory and the size of the at-risk population. And that combination of those two factors is what produces the score. I just want to take a moment though and just be honest with you about what PressurePoint can and can't do. It's free. It's public and it tells you whether your territory has a pressure problem. What it can't tell you is which households inside your territory are under pressure or how to reach them. And so the customer level layer is where BlastPoint closes the gap. Once we layer your customer data on top of PressurePoint, we can tell you it's not just your territory under pressure, it's specifically a single parent household living in an older home, or it's your elderly empty nesters who aren't on any program yet. And then here's the channel that they actually respond to. And so what that does is that helps you close the difference between knowing that you have a problem and being able to do something about that problem. And so with that, I want to show you the tool. So the PressurePoint methodology is rate plus poverty. So we pulled in EIA Form 861 for residential rates across 600 plus US utilities. We pulled in Census ACS data for poverty rates in each utility service area as well. And so we combined them together into an affordability pressure score. So higher score equals more pressure. And so let me show you why this matters. So on the left side is the first example. And so this is a utility that has rates that are above the national average. Their score is high, which makes sense. It's the obvious case. So on the right side of the slide is a more interesting one. This is Entergy, Arkansas. So rates here are below the national average. And if you were ranking by rate alone, this utility wouldn't be on your list. Higher poverty in their service territory is high, which means the customer base is stretched and arrears are likely climbing. So the pressure score puts them in the same neighborhood roughly as the high utility on the left-hand side. Entergy is the hidden case. So again, you can find your utility on PressurePoint real quick. You can search by name, you can search by state, and what you should be able to see is your rank, the inputs that produced it, and a comparison to your peers. And so what PressurePoint can't tell you is which households inside your service territory are under pressure and what programs to build around it. It tells you that your territory has pressure. So to find the customers, you have to layer customer level data on top. And what we're going to do next is take a quick look at what that would look like. So give me 1 second for technical handling, I'll call it. Okay. So two quick takeaways before I roll this. First, I want you to watch the correlation between struggle to pay and the age of someone's home. Second, I want you to watch what happens when you layer in whether someone owns or rents. And so we'll come back to that renter piece in a little bit when Bill will talk about weatherization. Okay, so what you're looking at is one utility's residential book inside the BlastPoint platform. About 547,000 customers. And you can see here we have 217 data points on every household comprising that 547,000. And so the two layers that matter most for this conversation are struggle to pay propensity and the age of the home. Older homes are typically less efficient and therefore have higher bills. And so when you layer that onto a customer who's already financially stretched, you have a cycle where a payment reminder isn't going to break. And so what you're seeing here on the screen is a distribution of the struggle to pay propensity scores across this utility's customer base. So then now you're going to watch what happens when we build a segment for a weatherization program. So first, we're filtering for homes built before 1990. And then the second filter is a high on the struggle to pay propensity score we showed earlier. And the third filter is the one that changes the program design, and that's renters. Renters can't authorize efficiency upgrades on the home they live in, which means a weatherization program built for owner-occupied homes won't reach them. So renters need a different intervention. So for this segment, we're leaving them out and we're focusing on homeowners. So you can see we started at 547,000 customers. With those three filters layered in, this segment lands at 4,461 members or people. Older homes, they're financially stretched, and they also own their own home. So that's a very targetable group for a weatherization program and not a blanket payment reminder. So what you just saw is the customer level layer applied to one utility's residential book. So the same idea applied to your data would give you those same segments for your service territory. The point is not the visual. The point is once you know which households are under pressure and what they look like, you can actually design a program for them. And so that is something that Bill is quite an expert in.
All right, there we are. Thanks, Courtney. So yeah, this feeds directly in. So one of the things we've recently developed at Tierra is the rate relief index. So while there's been a lot of historical economic tests for utility programs, the rate relief index is trying to simplify that and make it look strictly at whether a given program will put upward or downward pressure on rates. So it's zero centered. So if it's a program that doesn't affect rates one way or the other, then it will be zero. And if it provides kind of twice the benefit of the cost, then that index will be 100. And it's definitely possible to have an index below zero because that would put upward pressure on rates. Now we can look at kind of the entire portfolio lens if you go to the next slide. So this is kind of a prototypical look at both the volume, how many people are in a given program, and then multiply that by the rate relief it can provide. And so we've got on the far right, the one with kind of the best load shape improvement is an active managed charging program for electric vehicles, for example. And then we've got a smart thermostat program that also works very well and has a lot of participation because it's easy to join. Then we've got kind of, as you're looking at the left side, time of use rates, which have modest impact, very high number, but very modest impact per home weatherization, which has low peak impact and very small participation in this particular case. And then heat pumps are on the negative side because they're more of a rebate program, but there are ways to make the heat pump program move to the right in the rate relief index by pairing that with a smart thermostat program, for example. So this is one tool that you can provide to say to not only your regulators, your executives, and to the public, this is the portfolio that we're putting together to put downward pressure on rates over time. This is not immediate relief. This is your portfolio index that can help you move your portfolio from less effective to more effective along this one axis. Then if we go to the next slide, we can kind of talk about what kind of value we can put into the rate relief index that makes a difference. So one is the load shape. So is the program helping the load shape during those periods of time in which we either have, let's say, excess renewable power that we're possibly dumping, or when costs are highest, and then we can avoid those periods of time. So we have to analyze the load shape value. Then we've got absolutely the locational value. And this is something that's really coming into play in the last couple of years across the utility industry finally, which is, can we find those distribution locations that are under pressure, using that word again, and then direct our program marketing to those locations that provide the highest value to the grid. And then on top of that, can we look at the customer lens and find out where the customer will value that program the most, and hopefully have programs to target customers to make their bills lower through DR programs and energy efficiency programs, so those are affordable. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit more deeply about something that Courtney kind of looked at, which is looking at that vintage of the type of dwelling people are in. So whether that's a rental or an owner-occupied building, we have found when we really look at the data that those homes built between right kind of post-war World War II, 1945 to about 1985, when building standards really kind of crept up. These buildings, these homes tend to be kind of more cookie cutter, and so they're easy to do blitz programs on. Now, I've seen blitz programs that have worked very, very effectively, meaning you go in and you sweep through a neighborhood and you do weatherization very quickly and very, very cheaply. And so those are the types of programs I'd love to see more of across the country, because they actually fix the bill instead of dealing with arrearages. You actually lower their bill by 20 to 40% with about, I don't know, it's like $600 to $1,200 worth of investment. So you actually make it back by getting those bills paid over time. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tom, because we've got some methodologies on bill tariffs that can really work well with rental homes as well. So, Tom.
Thanks, Bill. So, Bill talked about the homes that would qualify for weatherization, and those are super important to focus on. And then you got to think through, number one, maybe I don't have the resources or enough funding in weatherization. You have to rely on LIHEAP and grants and leveraging other programs. And so when those aren't available, and for customers, what we call the donut hole, right, is customers who don't qualify for those limited income weatherization programs, but still really struggle to afford paying their bills, right? And so that limited to moderate income population, and it includes a lot of renters. What are opportunities from them in the playbook? And so we think about inclusive utility investment. And what that means is an investment from the utility. It's not financing. It's the utility directly investing in energy and efficiency improvements at the home. And the customer is going to pay that back over time in their bill. And the way these programs are set up is that the customer's monthly payment is structured in a way that their new bill, which includes both their new energy cost plus the tariff, is lower than what their bill would have been. And so what it offers is the ability for home improvements with no upfront investment needed from the customer, with no loan encumbrance or needing to qualify for financing, where I'm cash flow positive on day one and throughout the length of that term. And so it's a really interesting program design that really hits for those things that weatherization can't necessarily cover. It's often thought of as like a niche program. It's now being done in 13 states, and it's definitely seeing growing adoption. What's neat about it is it's a very sustainable program design. The investment gets repaid over time, which becomes seed funding for the next investment. So you've created something that doesn't tie you to funding caps within LIHEAP and other grants, right? So, and a few things to just be clear about. It needs to be structured as a tariff to make sure that you have all the benefits of no upfront costs needed, no credit qualification needed from the homeowner or renter. The fact that it does apply to rental properties is a really important feature of this. And the way it works is that as tenants move in and out, the new tenant is now taking benefit of all the energy improvements, and they are now going to be paying the new bill, which includes the tariff, which was lower than the bill would have been. And so, in that way, it's something that stays with the dwelling, and the benefits stay with all of with the new tenants, as well as the way that that is funded over time. Um, and so the so the this really can work as its own program, or what Bill and I have been talking about is doing a blitz where weatherization can cover part of the homes. These other homes in the same area are probably cookie cutters where they have similar kind of issues, and that's where you can use inclusive utility investment to kind of take care of all the different structures that you're dealing with there. The next one I think is really in your wheelhouse, Courtney, so I'm going to turn it over to you for customer level targeting.
Thank you. Yeah, the third panel on this slide on the right is the customer level targeting, which, yeah, that's the BlastPoint piece. So once you have the Blitz list or the IUI candidate list, the question is, how do you actually reach the customer? And single parents respond to different channels than empty nesters do. Multi-generational households need a different message than a solo renter. And so segmentation by life stage, household type, and propensity is what makes the outreach optimal and work at its best. And so the reason this matters in this slide is that program design is only half the job. The other half is getting the right customers to engage. And so, Tom, do you want to talk a little bit more about how smart targeting can help improve that RRI score?
Yeah, thanks. And it really comes down to not only smart targeting, but where Elizabeth was around integrating this too to the touch points you already have. As we all know, all utilities have various and multiple touch points with customers, but we're often not using those to promote the things that we can do to help affordability. And so that's really the key point to the educate pillar we have here. Train the touch points you already have to empower them to be better ambassadors for your programs. And the way that works is often with what we call the WIFM, right? What's in it for me? It's, as Elizabeth mentioned, it's really an internal sales process too, to get your partners to understand how helping you meet your goals is going to help them meet their goals. So with the call center, training agents to spot simple affordability cues and route customers to the right program, not just to invoice lines and payment arrangements and things like that, but something that actually solves the problem versus a band-aid. And what you'll find is that there's a little tension here that says, yeah, but it's going to increase call times. But the reality is it creates a solution so that that's not a call you're going to get next month and the next month after that, and in every month where you're in peak energy needs, where that customer is going to continue to be challenged because they're in an inefficient building. And so this is a way you actually reduce call volume over time. So there's the WIFM for your call center. For T&D and field, we've done this work in Arizona. Field technicians are out in the field. They often can identify issues around affordability and around inefficient dwellings, and particularly in neighborhoods where they're having grid constraints, right? And so the WIFM for those guys is first, hey, you can increase reliability and reduce outages in these areas by helping fix dwellings that are driving peaks. The other thing that we've found is that this empowers those folks out in the field to be able to be better solutions and have better outcomes with customers, and they really enjoy it. And so it gives them more quality of their own work experience. And then finally, of billing and collections. A lot of times this is thinking more about like payment arrangements and things like that, and even disconnections. And so instead, can we channel customers into programs, particularly using BlastPoint data to identify customers who are truly payment challenged and not just behind in their bill payment, and channel those folks to real solutions that helps them to avoid the next disconnection, avoid the next need to call, and really become a better grid asset in the process. And so that's some of the stuff that we get excited about in terms of the playbook and how it can produce better outcomes for both the utility and customers. And Elizabeth, I know you've been living this on a day-to-day basis, so I wanted to kind of turn it to you to talk more about how we integrate.
Everything that you're talking about right now, Tom, reminds me of being proactive right now. We're writing a prescription, okay? And integrating what we're talking about here right now is being proactive. We're going to be addressing the home rather than reactive, which is paying the bill. I like to think of it as a three-legged stool. We have to think about, what does this customer really need right now? So think of it. There are three things that cannot operate without the other if you really want to write the right prescription here. We're talking about the fact that they need to have weatherization. We need to look at that house. Are there holes in it? Do we need to plug them up? We need to look at, do they need a Band-Aid right now just to be able to get by? Do we need to pay part of that bill? Do we need to find some assistance? LIHEAP is in trouble right now. What about the customers that are ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, the customers just above the poverty line? And then we have to also address the behavior. The customer behavior is everything, because if we can address those three things, the house, a little bit of financial assistance, and their behavior, we can address what we're looking at right here, which is it takes a village to really address this whole issue. And to write the PressurePoint prescription, we need Tierra, we need BlastPoint, and I'm super excited about what the possibility is. And if our company invests in this, where we can go. Courtney, take us to the next step, please.
Sure. And then also finally, to help you make the case for why this matters in dollars. Hang on just a sec. Oh, sorry. So we're going to come up on Q&A soon, and then also we're going to give you a framework on why this matters in dollars. So if you take nothing else from this hour, I'd like you to take these three things away. So one is, please schedule a working session with us. A QR code that will come on a future slide will get you there. We'll come and bring your PressurePoint score, your customer level breakdown, and your playbook. We'll provide a customized plan for your service territory. Also, run a rate relief index analysis and take a look at your programs and see where you can most move the needle on getting your programs to deliver the performance that they need to. And then finally, as we mentioned earlier, train one touch point. Pick your busiest one. Usually it's the call center. Rewrite the script centered around the agency network, and then track how many customers actually get the referral. And so these are three things that we think are very doable in the next 90 days. And so then to help you make the case for, hold on, I'm gonna get this playing real quick. Sorry. To help you make the case for this work in dollars to your own leadership, we've built something specific for this webinar. It's called a Customer Affordability Playbook, and it's customized to your utility. So here's what's in it and what you're seeing across the screen. Your PressurePoint score is included and where you rank among your peers. We have your residential rate, the poverty rate in your service territory, and how these two combine into pressure. It also includes a forecasted savings range for solving this problem at your utility, and it's broken out into three levers: call center reduction, bad rent reduction, and engagement campaign efficiency. And under each level, let me play this again, and under each lever, the specific tactics that move the number mapped to the 4 places customer assistance programs win or lose, which is awareness, paperwork, stigma, and funding. And so to give you a sense of what this looks like in practice, what you've been seeing is the Con Edison version that shows annual recoverable losses in the $19 million to $68 million range, with bad debt reduction alone accounting for roughly $54 million of that on the high end. Now, obviously, your numbers will be different, but the structure is the same. It qualifies the problem in your language and the language that your CFO and your rate case team already use. And so moving on from this, I just wanted to tease something real quick. Another helpful tip, and then we'll get to Q&A. PressurePoint shows you where affordability pressure is sitting. We're building the same kind of benchmark for a different question, which is what utilities are sitting on the most untapped grid capacity through their EE programs. Most US utilities only capture a fraction of their addressable EE potential, both on the residential and commercial sides. So that number matters more every quarter as more data centers land and electrification efforts accelerate. So it's called the EE Savings Benchmark. It's not live yet, but the wait list is open at eeindex.blastpoint.com, and you can scan the QR code if you want first access to when this launches. And so now we will get going into the Q&A.
Excellent. Well, great work, everybody. Remember, you can place your questions in the chat here, and it looks like we actually already have a few questions. But before we get kicked off, I'm curious to hear from each stakeholder because you're all coming from a different perspective. What do you think is the one thing, if folks were to take away from this webinar, that a utility could act on? Maybe Courtney, if you want to kick us off with your recommendation, that would be great.
Sure. I would recommend getting on PressurePoint and looking to see what your PressurePoint score is. Just it gives you the high level view and a quick pulse check of where your utility sits.
Excellent. Elizabeth?
I would have to say that as I'm sitting here watching this right now, it's going to be super important for us to get the data to be able to convince your leadership that this is what is needed. We need to know, where do people sit that need help? And I think that we got the experts in the room right here now.
I love it. Bill?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much money tied up in the grid that will become available to be part of program incentives if we design those programs correctly and direct them to those areas, mostly on the distribution network, that provide the highest value to the grid. And then we can also then start transferring a lot of that benefit to the customers who need it the most. So it's really the targeting that has to come with the not only the human side of it or the business side and getting to the right customers, but also matching that to the highest grid benefit. So that's probably the big takeaway that I would promote.
Excellent. And last but certainly not least, Tom?
I always like to know where I am on the scoreboard, right, when we're playing a game. And so it's really important that we think about doing a rate relief index across your portfolio to understand where, not only where your portfolio sits as a whole, but where your individual programs sit. And as Bill mentioned earlier, it's not that you can't move those programs, right? This is based on currently implemented. And so what are the things you could do through smarter targeting, data, integration, ways that you're being smarter about bundling opportunities for customers that will drive higher rate relief, higher cost effectiveness, and higher scale for all of your DSM programs?
Excellent. We have a ton of questions already in the chat. If you haven't already and you have questions for the team, this is a great place to put them in the Q&A. I'll first start with a question from Andrea here. Have you all put together a RRI on the same graph for if the heat pump rebates are paired with smart thermostats? We're looking into possibly being more extensive on our heat pump incentive or giving people more education on cold climate heat pumps, inverter-driven heat pumps. Thankfully, we have Energy Saver NC, which is a state rebate program, energy efficiency upgrades like electrical upgrades, insulation, sealing, water heating solutions, energy efficient appliances, and duct sealing.
Long question. So yes, the answer is yes. You can, when you couple the heat pump program with a smart thermostat program, for example, it's not the only example. You can also couple it with many other different things, including a solar option and an EV option. But let's go with something simple, which would be a smart thermostat. It will definitely move that to the right. What it doesn't necessarily do is make the circle bigger, because heat pumps are a fairly niche approach. So how do you do something that's also large as opposed to something that's very precise? Both can be valuable. You don't have to do one or the other. But again, knowing, as Tom said, knowing what the scorecard is very important. But absolutely, you can move that to the right by coupling that with smart thermostats, DR programs, possibly an advanced rate design, for example. So building automation, it all comes into play. But how many people are actually going to join and benefit from any given heat pump program is one of your key questions.
Super helpful. Thank you, Bill. We have another question from Brody here. What do you feel is the best way for utility field staff to refer the WAP or LIHEAP programs? Flagging in a system versus leave behind materials versus talking directly to a customer or something else?
That's a great question. And I think it's like in all the above, you have to have all those tools, and different customers are going to respond to a different
Hmm.
approach. But the most important thing is that you are those folks in the field don't need to know all the details of programs. And so the training can be very quick and pointed about how to get them access to the programs and a quick elevator speech around them, as opposed to having to be an expert. So I think that's one of the things that's really important is like you don't need to do a lot of training. You just need to arm them with the tools and the materials. And I think having all three of those options is what really makes sense. And then
Hmm.
being able to let the customer self-select in what works for them.
But Tom, I think we also have to remember too that we have to build the relationships with the agencies that are managing those programs. They may not have the capacity, and they may need you as a utility to stand by them. And they may not want you to stand by them to help lift up those programs. But if you can help them with their capacity issues so they can get LIHEAP into more homes, or they can, expand the weatherization assistance program, WAP. I just think we have to start at the ground, start with the agencies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the integration piece to make sure that the assistance is there.
I love it. Courtney, I see you're unmuted as well. Anything you want to add?
Oh, I was just gonna, Elizabeth already partially addressed it. I was gonna ask Elizabeth because I know she has a long history with building the boots on the ground and establishing the relationship. So I was curious what her best practices were on building the relationship with the field.
I think you got to go way above and beyond what you're doing. For us, we can't always throw money at the customer. So instead, we have to go out, like I said, build the relationships and find out where the holes are, where the gaps are in service. And as I mentioned, agencies have capacity issues. So whatever you can do to, first of all, get to know them and find out where their weakest point is, see if they're interested in allowing you to maybe offer your volunteers so that they can help do a little bit more. Or maybe you have a sponsorship or donation program. I just think that you have to be very creative and out of the box to be able to just even talk about what other kinds of solutions there might be for their customers, because we're all trying to help the same people.
We have one of our utility customers is working on building an internal resource specifically for field and then also for other customer facing employees that a field person could go look,
Yeah.
type up a customer, and then that system would then recommend the program that the field tech should refer to. And so we're in conversations with helping them build that tool.
I love that idea because they're out in the field. If you've got that logo on your shirt, they're going to ask you questions and expect you to be able to provide them with some solutions. And it's nice to have a toolbox for the people that are out there.
That's what I found when we've done this work is that they embrace it because right now they don't have good answers and they'd like to have better customer outcomes when they're out in the field. So as opposed to them feeling like this wasn't part of their job, they have leaned in and really embraced this in every instance that I've done it.
Yeah, and I like to add that the five-letter word trust needs to come into play way more often, which is as you do the ethnography and you talk to lower income customers about what they worry about, that word comes up all the time in different forms, which is, well, do they trust the utility? Do they trust the agency? Do they trust the government? Do they trust? So people don't get money because they don't trust the organization they could get it from. And so building that trust. So one of the things that utilities can do is look at that journey that customers have to go on, find out where the high trust relationships are, and then go focus on those with your programs. That really is a key.
That's low hanging fruit, Bill. I mean, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And if they already have a good relationship with, say, the city, maybe there's a great program the city offers. We would want to invite them to work with us so that we could all go at it together.
Excellent points. We have another great question here from Larry. It says, excellent information. How do you get regulators and interveners to recognize that good utility programs cannot fix bigger problems caused by income inequality and other cost of living categories?
I think we have to band together. I think just one utility going at the regulators is not going to do it, but maybe if your whole state goes at it together to approach regulators, that maybe you could help make the case. You'd have to have some case studies too to present.
And one of the
Yeah.
reasons we developed the rate relief index was for discussions with regulators to get them to understand. They see often DSM as a line item on bills that they think they can improve affordability by getting rid of that line item, when in fact it's one of the drivers for rate relief, that there's not a ton of those. And so, the rate relief index, I think, is one of the tools we can use to have those conversations and show how this is moving customers in the right direction.
Really helpful, Tom. Another question here for Elizabeth. In the past, when you've helped redesign programs based on data and your interaction with customers, what do you think is the biggest resistance that you've hit internally, and how did you get past it?
Well, that's a really great point. Like I said, if our leadership doesn't understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of someone struggling to pay their bill, I think that you've got to start kind of at a baseline to get them on board at the very beginning. There's something that we've done that we did at JEA when I came from, that was a municipality. We did a Meet Alice poverty simulation where you got into family groups, and then we invited all of our agencies to the same event, and they got to find out what it's like to try and find food assistance, to try and get to the bank, to find transportation, to maybe have a bilingual senior living in your home. All of the different things that happened to our leadership while they played this poverty simulation game. And when they came out of it, they got it. It doesn't, and we can't fix it all the time. We can't, but we can empathize and stand by the customers by understanding what they're going through. I think sometimes just listening is half of it. Get out there where the customers are. Get out from behind the desk. Chesapeake Utilities is doing customer care days right now. I attended one in Marianna, Florida, and in Dover, Delaware. Hearing the stories from our customers, I mean, I couldn't fix it, but just listening to them and finding some small crumb that I could offer them, or at least another solution in the same room that I was in, it made a big difference. And just like Bill said, it's that 5-letter word, trust.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. To Bill and Tom, this might be a good question for both of you. Most assistant programs are often designed for income eligible customers. What about the folks in the middle? And Courtney and Elizabeth, you also might have some insight into this as well, that don't quite qualify for the income eligible programs, but are still really struggling from paycheck to paycheck to pay their energy bills.
It's the same problem though, right? So you either have assistance or you don't have assistance, and whether you can afford to pay your bill or not. But
yeah,
it's when you look at the details of the data. So if you do the data analysis, there's actually a pretty small percentage of customers, somewhere between 7 and 10%, depending upon the service territory, that are kind of chronically dealing with and unable to pay their bills over time. So they're a separate category. And then you've got another 15% in different chunks that they either go in and out of difficulty based upon their current personal decision. And then you've got people who are just really bad at managing their money. And all of those different types of personalities require different types of solutions. So one of the things is that matching. Are the customer service people able to ask a few questions when someone calls in, identify which type of customer they are, and then do a quick matchup of the program that's most likely to help them? That could be again, I don't want to put lots of people on payment programs because it really doesn't help over time. But some people, that's what they need. Something as simple as paying a different amount based upon how much money they have that month and put it into an account, not based upon how big their bill is because it's hot or cold. That was a big one that we discovered. It's just like, you know what? I make all my money in the summer, so I want to put money into account so it can be paid for in the winter. Those are the types of program matching that I think can make a big difference.
And then I think on the new program side, right, we need to think more about rent programs that apply to rental properties. That's where a lot of these issues often reside. I think another thing I've seen a nice trend in is kind of dissociating from exactly the customer's affordability to like disadvantaged communities and communities that have higher energy burdens, and having program designs where you pay a higher percentage of incremental cost in those areas. So you're kind of giving some more help. We talked about inclusive utility investment. That is an excellent opportunity for customers that don't have to bring upfront costs but can get significant energy improvements done in their homes. And then just a number of ways that we bundle, right? Just bundling programs into like giving more support for a customer instead of having them cherry pick a bunch of different programs, and giving them a solution bundle is super, super valuable here. So those are just some of the kind of playbook ideas that I think of.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, I think that's all the questions we're able to take today. If you have any other questions, Courtney will share with you now what you can do.
So I see that Andrea asked a question. Andrea, I will email you and work with you to get your answer for that. So, but basically, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Highly encourage you to book a working session for your utility specifically. We'll bring your pressure point score and your customer level breakdown. Again, I was honored to share the virtual stage with the experts that we have here with us. And I just want to say thank you to Bill and Tom and Elizabeth and to everyone here who spent the hour with us. So thank you so much, and very much appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
That was fun.